We'll highlight the culinary empire of two famous chefs and restaurateurs and find out how it all got started. Joe and Paul Bartolotta are my special guests next on I Remember. Hi, I'm Jim Peck. Welcome to I Remember. Well, we're on location in downtown Milwaukee at what is going to be the Rumpus Room, brand new gastropub right down here across from the PAC. It is the latest venture of the Bartolotta restaurants, and joining me today are Joe and Paul Bartolotta, both renowned chefs. They're brothers, and they're at the heart of everything that happens here. Take a look.
Joe and Paul Bartolotta are not the first well-known Bartolotta brothers in the Milwaukee area. Their father, TJ Bartolotta, was the first executive director of Festa Italiana, and TJ's brother Sam started the famous Bartolotta Fireworks Company. Joe and Paul made their mark in the business of food. After years of honing his culinary skills in Italy and France, Chef Paul Bartolotta worked at some top restaurants in the U.S., including Spiaggia in Chicago. Joe returned to Milwaukee after acquiring years of restaurant experience on the East Coast, including New York. In 1993, Joe and Paul opened Ristorante Bartolotta. Located in Wauwatosa, where they grew up, it was their first signature restaurant. It features authentic Northern Italian cuisine, and the Cucina Rustica menu focuses on fresh ingredients. The Bartolottas opened Lake Park Bistro in Milwaukee in '95, up on the bluff overlooking Lake Michigan. It offers country-style French cooking, from the traditional to more contemporary menu items. Mr. B's, a Bartolotta steakhouse, was added in the late '90s in the suburb of Brookfield. In 2004, Bacchus opened in downtown Milwaukee at the Cudahy Tower. In partnership with Michael Cudahy, the Bartolotta Restaurant Group opened Harbor House last year at the lakefront. In addition to their fine dining restaurants, the Bartolottas offer casual dining at Pizzeria Piccola and the North Point Custard Stand. Bartolotta Catering has service at the Berner Botanical Gardens, Discovery World at Pierre, Wisconsin, and the historic Grain Exchange. Carolatas is their philanthropic foundation, and staff team up to benefit the community. While Joe heads up the Bartolotta Restaurant Group with hundreds of employees, Paul is busy with the restaurant he owns separately out of state. Bartolotta Ristorante Del Mar at Wynn, Las Vegas, features Italian coastal cuisine with fresh seafood and shellfish flown in from the Mediterranean. Paul has not one, but two James Beard Awards to his name, Best Chef Midwest and Best Chef Southwest. In Milwaukee, the Bartolotta brothers have expanded operations again with the Rumpus Room. Before the gastropub opened in October, Jim Peck joined them for a conversation amidst the final preparations.
You guys are so successful. Do you always agree on everything?
We don't agree on anything.
Oh, come on now.
Nothing.
What's your famous line?
We will agree to disagree.
No. My brother's famous line when he's asked this question is always, "We're like oil and vinegar, but we make a good vinaigrette."
Well, that works, okay.
I love that, and that's very true.
You know what?
We're very yin.
See, like in this particular instance, like I'm interrupting, no one is going to tell him more the truth than me.
Okay, what is Joe's biggest skill?
Joe's biggest skill. I think the thing that he's done better than anything is he's created a culture amongst our employees that they exude his philosophy of hospitality. Probably he loves the design and he's great at it, and he loves sort of the creation part of it. But I think if there's one thing that he's done that I think very few restaurants anywhere have been able to do is create an employee culture.
Joe, what does Paul bring to the table?
Paul brings an enormous amount of passion, a tremendous amount of honesty. He alluded to it earlier. He will tell me exactly what he has on his mind, whether I want to hear it or not. And that he thinks at times I tune him out, but he has a profound impact on a lot of my decision making as it comes to the company. So I think we really work well together.
Can you, either of you, think of an instance where you did have an argument and how it was resolved and which one of you was right in the end?
I think as brothers growing up together and coming from my father and the culture that the Italians have, first and foremost, we will always put our brotherhood or brothership first.
No doubt.
And, you know, this is all noise. This is all not really meaningful when it comes to family. And so I honestly believe that we've never gotten to blows. Close. But, you know, the fact that he's my brother will always out-trump everything.
You told me when we were warming up, and I used the word chef for both of you, you don't consider yourself a chef.
It's a huge, to me, it's an honor and it's a huge position to be called a chef. It's something that is earned over years and years and years of toiling in good kitchens. And I never did that. I chose a different direction. One morning I woke up, Paul was in Italy training to become a great chef, and I said, you know what, I should probably get my butt in the business. The kitchen didn't excite me as much as the back of the house and as much as the management of the business. And I thought someday we'd be doing something together.
Well, what's the difference between a very good cook and a chef?
A very good cook. Well, that's a very good cook and a chef. Well, I mean, one is a professional sort of title. I think that's something that's earned by running a business. I mean, there are people that are very, very good cooks, but being, I think, a really good chef means that you need to be skilled in a lot of others other than just your cooking skills. Because today, probably when I got into this business, I thought my role was going to be just a chef. I'm going to cook.
Yeah.
I'm going to make food. But all of a sudden, you find yourself as a counselor to your staff and their personal issues. You find yourself a business manager. You find yourself in dealing with marketing and media. We're doing this today. So there's a whole series of things that the chef role has changed into. So it's a lot more than just cooking. So if I had to make a distinction, one is a cook who actually cooks the food, but I think a chef's role is much bigger. You need to be a businessman, you need a psychologist, you need to be a marketing person, you need to understand finance, you need to understand return on investment. I mean, who thought that we'd be discussing discounted cash flows and things like this, when I was going to culinary school, or understanding, return of capital and these sort of things. So, it's changed a lot, but I got into this business because I wanted to cook. And that's where my heart is. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. I love being involved in that end of it. But I find that in anything that you do, you measure yourself. And the economic side is something you learned in the second phase of your career. And I like to think that you measure yourself not only, artistically and culinarily, but you measure yourself on whether you're able to perform your craft with all the same passion that you want, but in a way that can make it profitable and make it a business.
If I came to you, turn off the lights today, we're finished with the show, and I say, Joe and Paul, I love the restaurant business. I love restaurants. I love going to restaurants. I'm thinking of getting into the restaurant business.
You need therapy.
a lot of it.
And you need therapy, or you must just have a lot of money you want to put at risk and throw away.
The thing is, what Paul said earlier is so true. Restaurants have very limited lifespans. They fall in and out of favor very quickly with the public. The public is very fickle, and they have a predetermined idea of what something should be many times. With all the advent of the TV shows and everything on the cable news networks and all the, the TV Food Network, people have become highly educated when it comes to food.
Or at least they think they're educated.
They're all food critics all of a sudden, and that's great. It makes us raise our game a little bit higher as well. But restaurants fail at an alarming rate.
Why? Why do so many restaurants fail?
There's a romantic side of the restaurant business where somebody's whispering in their ear and says, I could do this. I would love to do this, There's a sexiness about the restaurants. I'm involved with other guys. I'm involved with other guys who make bolts and paint rollers and other stuff. There's nothing sexy about that, but there's something sexy about being in a restaurant.
Oh yeah, it's the whole, and that's part of what you're selling.
And what Joe alluded to before was, he said, there's a lifespan to a restaurant, and there's a saying in the industry that I believe very strongly that, that restaurants don't get tired, owners do, and it's easy for a restaurateur to kind of get bored with the business. And I think, again, to Joe's credit, not only has he cultivated a staff within, but you know, we have a team of people that's part of our executive team, our director group, who are passionate, who have grown up with our company, who understand our culture, and also have been given enough freedom, which is again, you know, part of Joe's, you know, skill set, is to allow these people to feel a real sense of ownership and participation, so they keep that energy, they keep that newness going. And even if we have restaurants that are, you know, Tosa, we opened in '93, it was like 17, 18 years old. That restaurant is probably better today than the day it opened, and it's evolving. We have a chef and a team of people there that are just making it, and our entire support group from a corporate level is there to support that growth.
I remember talking to a chef years ago, and the owner, and he was doing, he seated us, greeted us, seated us, took our order, went in the other room, cooked, served the order, and I said, why are you doing everything? And he said, well, I had to fire my chef the other day. And I said, why? And what he said to me chills me to this day, and it was a long time ago. He said, I found that he was stealing too much. Does that?
Too much.
Too much.
Wow.
Does that resonate?
Well, I don't know. I operate in a casino where there are cameras everywhere.
Even in the kitchen?
In the kitchen, in the hallways. I mean, everywhere. You know, you drop a towel on the floor and you pick it up, and the risk management and health services will be in your kitchen saying, that gentleman, he dropped his towel and he picked it up and he was going to reuse it. I mean, so in that sense, we have that control.
I think there are no guarantees in life in any profession. We take a lot of time on the front end and interview people and find people with what we call, you know, hospitality hearts, people who are good. I can train anybody to do anything. I can't train you to be a good person. So, do we have shrinkage? We call it shrinkage. Yeah, of course we do. And
something disappears. It shrinks.
You know, human nature is such where you want to believe everybody, but the reality is, with the numbers, we've got 800 employees, Jim.
Wow.
You know, in 15 different locations. So it's hard to keep on track of everything. We'd like to think that we have good enough people where they wouldn't do that.
All these locations. Why open another restaurant now?
It's fun.
Is it?
It's fun. It's fun for us, and it's also fun for our team because they're invigorated and they want to do more and grow, and it's a chance for the young people to sort of grow into bigger positions. So it's as much for the staff as it is for us, really, because again, we didn't need to take on another huge hunk of debt.
By the way, what is a gastropub?
Gastropub is something started over in Europe, actually. A lot of the large breweries owned a lot of the pubs. Up to 5,000 pubs they owned at times. When the economy started to melt down a little bit, they started divesting themselves of all these pubs. And these are small little mom and pop type places. So a talented young chef could actually start a business very quickly, very inexpensively, and he'd throw a stove in the corner and he'd start cooking on this stove from a pretty high level of culinary talent, and combine it with his pub. And that's sort of the melding of the two concepts together.
To a certain extent, it was many of these young chefs who had trained in these Michelin star restaurants doing very haute cuisine, and they knew that, you know, based on their personal family, you know, wealth, that they would never be able to build a restaurant like they had trained in. So what they did was say, I want to be in business for myself. How do I do it? And when these pubs became available, they went in and said, okay, I'm going to get a mismatch of chairs, I'm going to get a mismatch of china, and I'm going to go and put two stoves in the corner, as Joe said. And you know what? Because I am such a skilled culinarian,
I know how to cook, right?
I'm going to make something interesting. So it became, you know, great beer programs, great, you know, like wine by the glass programs, basically targeted to a lesser expensive consumer, and they also dealt with like secondary cuts of meat, lesser expensive. You know, not everything was foie gras and white truffles and that sort of thing, but they made really exciting, juicy, you know, delicious food for the average man.
Why the name Rumpus Room?
History.
You know the answer to that story, but your interview in '95 with my father. You know, he talked about it a little bit. His first foray into his own business was he bought a bar called Connie's Rumpus Room, and my father was the consummate promoter, and he was going to play his music. He didn't care what everybody else wanted. He went out and bought the state-of-the-art turntable and sound system.
It was hi-fi. Bought a hi-fi.
Remember that? Yes.
Yes.
And a Monday night was opera night.
Opera night.
And if you liked opera, that was great. If you didn't like opera, you could either enjoy it or you could leave.
Right.
But
And
the
he
whole
didn't-
opera
he
was
didn't
going on.
care.
No.
He didn't care. And he told me, it's actually in your piece, he played a Wagnerian opera, and at the end of the night, he had 3 people in the bar, and they were all sleeping, you know?
But he was enjoying it.
But he was enjoying it.
Did you always intend to go into the food business?
I did.
You did.
I didn't. I bounced around. I was loading trucks. I was bartending. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I never went to college. You know, went to the MATC program for a short time. Paul completed it. Went there for 2 years. Paul started at a little place. Tell him about your start. Balustrades?
I started Balustrades I was 15 years old, and I had to get a work permit so that I could work, 20 hours a week, and I had to get the school as well as my parents to sign off that I could work, and it was more, to make a little bit of money, take girls out. That's what my motivation was initially. But once I got inside of the restaurant, I just love the camaraderie. I love the excitement of it. I love the rush, the thrill of being busy, and I never looked back. I mean, I knew that this is what I wanted. I remember going to meet one of my counselors, and I remember my father asking me, what do you want to do? And I said, Dad, I really, really love the restaurant business.
Yep.
And he said, then do it. He said, do it, because you won't work a day in your life. And the truth is, I love every single annoying part of our business.
Didn't you, if memory serves, go to work for somebody and he said you ought to pay me?
Wow, how did you know that?
To come and work here?
Yeah, years ago. Yeah, years ago. So I remember working first there, and then I worked for Joe DeRose at the Chancery.
But tell that story.
Okay, so I was, at MAT, just starting MATC, and I knew I wanted to go to the Cooks program. And I saw an ad in the paper saying working apprenticeship with a master continental chef, which I really didn't know what that meant. And I drove up there in the Yellow Maverick, and I drove up there and I had this interview. And at the end of the interview, he said, the name of the chef was John Marangelli, or Giovanni Marangelli. And he said to me, well, you know what, when I was young and I was learning to be a chef, I paid my chef to teach me, so you should pay me to teach you. And I was just, I was a kid from Wauwatosa, and I said, right, okay. And I went home and I said to my dad, I said, Dad, the craziest thing, I went to this job interview and he wants me to pay him. That's nuts. And he said, yeah, it sounds pretty crazy. What'd you think of the interview? What'd you think of the guy? And my dad obviously knew of John's reputation as being one of the preeminent culinarians, one of the greats. And so, I spent a fair amount of time, muddling it over, and like several days later, I kept talking about it. My dad said, well, for something that you're not interested, you keep bringing it up. And so I called Marangelli again up. I went up and met with him again. I said, I'm not going to pay you. I want to get paid. And he goes, well, I'm not going to pay you. And I just said, but you want me to pay him? So we started off that I was going to pay him, and then I wanted to get paid, so we compromised that I would practically work for free. And I did. And I worked.
That was his compromise.
Yeah, that was the compromise. I started off from a bad that was my first really bad negotiation. But it was one of the smartest things I ever did, because I learned so much about cooking from this guy. And I tell everybody, that the most important thing I learned from Marangelli was simply this. I worked for 6 months in the kitchen. I never cooked a single dish. I would make all the mise en place, or the preparation of the ingredients on the plate. I would give it to him. He would cook it. He would give me the done dish to plate. He'd want me to taste it, and I would plate it. And each time I would go through this process, I didn't realize what he was teaching me. And one night he walked off the line, lit a cigarette, and said, you're cooking tonight. I had never cooked a dish, and I was so frustrated. I'd been there 6 months. I had not cooked a dish. But the first time I made that dish, I realized that the food started talking to me, and that he taught me that the balance of those ingredients, the amount of time that you cooked it, and at what temperature determined flavor. And it was a formula that I teach when I do, teach at MATC, or I teach at, Culinary Institute of America, or different places. And in my kitchen every day, I talk about balance of ingredients, time and temperature equals taste.
You were quoted one time as saying that true Italian food, if it has more than 3 or 4 ingredients, it's not real Italian food.
No.
Really?
It is. Not 3 more ingredients. Principal ingredients, it's mussels and beans, it's clams and leeks, it's spaghetti with lobster, it's baked fish with tomatoes.
The food relies heavily on the raw material. Yeah. So if you start with great raw materials, you'll end up with a great product. Yeah. And if you mess with it too much, it's not real anymore.
I think the success of Tosta, which was our first restaurant, was the fact that we brought, we had a lot of Italian-American food, and we're Italian-American, and we've never been critical, and we still have memories of, eating Dad's meatballs on Sunday and burping them up on Wednesday. So we respect the Italian-American cuisine, but when we came here, we brought, to the first restaurant, a more modern, authentic Italian, something a little bit more representative of what you might actually find in Italy. And we found out that the consumer was ready. I mean, Joe was like, help me do this restaurant, and I'm like, Joe, there's a reason why they're not like big city restaurants like New York or Chicago. I said, Joe, there's a reason. And he goes, tell me one. He said, we have a lot of good restaurants, but they're kind of old school. And he said, Paul, I'm telling you there's a market. I'm like, Joe, you're nuts. He's like, I'm telling you there's a market. And to his vision, it turned out that people were really in this city, really ready, and it was up to us to just deliver quality and something new and value.
Joe, are there things that you get on a menu and people just love them? And I'm thinking of a particular dish at Ristorante, and then you can't get rid of that dish. Does that ever frustrate you?
We've got about 4 or 5 that we've tried to take off. The rigatoni con melanzane, with the eggplant and the fresh mozzarella. We tried to take it off. Yeah, duck ragu, can't take it off.
Yeah.
We were bold by taking Caesar salad off. And there was a lot of flack about that, but
we still keep it prepped.
We still keep it ready. If they want it,
the first thing we learned is the answer is yes.
And a completely different exercise than when we first opened Lake Park Bistro. We again followed the same blueprint. We wanted to be very authentic, very true to our core, and do a classic French bistro. And some of the dishes, tête de veau, runions, veal kidneys, they didn't sell, and people didn't understand them. And the verbiage on the menus was all French, so we had to take a step back after the first 6 months because we were really nervous we weren't going to make it, and we retooled the menu and still were true to ourselves, but came up with things people could identify with.
But how did 2 nice Italian guys come up with a French restaurant?
Well, I had worked in France.
Yep.
When Joe found the location for Lake Park, he called me and he said, I got this great location. I came up and I looked at it. He's like, I got this great vision and we'll do another Ristorante. And I said, Joe, we already did one. And again, we didn't know what the market would bear. Wauwatosa was a 52-seat restaurant. And now we're stepping into something really big along the lake. And I said, let's do a French restaurant. And again, he looked at me and he goes, are you nuts? I said, Joe, trust me on this one. People think that French food has to be small portions and very expensive.
Yes.
But
and heavy sauces.
Right. But the regional French cooking, the cuisine of the bistro and the brasserie, and that what is like, and the cuisine of the people is not that haute cuisine, fancy French food. So I said, if we do a French version of kind of what's been successful here, we will have 2 different concepts that could complement each other. You don't want to have competition for one of your current restaurants by redoing the same concept and competing with yourself.
I agree with him.
And it took a while, but no, what all it really took was just a couple of books to show him the rustic food. And he goes, you're right. Why wasn't I? He knew it because he had worked at Maxime's, Maxwell's Plum. And they had some French bistro food. And as soon as he saw a few books, he's like, right, this looks rustic, and we could give big portions and price it accordingly. And it felt, that it wasn't such a stretch. And I think that in the end, it was the beginning of our ability to not be pigeonholed into only doing Italian food, because I know how to cook other things other than Italian food, obviously.
Right.
Are you good customers if you go to a restaurant, or are you hypercritical?
He's horrible.
Thank you.
Horrible. And it must. I look at him and I feel pain for him because I just think he is so clued into perfection that when he sees imperfection, it bothers him. I have a little bit more tolerance, I think, but I mean,
I get a rebuttal here.
No. You'll walk into a place, he'll smell the glass as a dirty glass. It's not dirty. It just
smells like dishwasher water. Smells like fish. And why should I drink out of that? Okay. Excuse me.
Is this your rebuttal, by the way?
No. I mean, here's the thing: is like even in our own restaurants, I'm very exacting in everything that I do. Not that Joe is not. And
much more so than I am.
Yeah, maybe. Definitely. But it's because I also, the mentors that I had were exacting. I learned how to eat at a table where a guy put champagne flutes underneath my arms and taught me how to eat like this in a certain way so that I could learn like the correct posture eating at a restaurant. I mean, I came from such a very high-end, very traditional European environment. So I think that being exacting and commenting on everything makes everyone tough. You know, I don't run around screaming at everybody, but if I get a glass that isn't good, I send it back. If I get a fork that's bent, I send it back. If they put a pat of butter on a plate that's lukewarm and all of a sudden the butter's sliding around, I'm sorry, that's just not acceptable in a Bartolotta restaurant.
What about frozen butter?
I don't know what that is.
That's the butter that comes and you try to spread it on your roll and it tears the roll apart because it's rock hard.
And it's a perfect,
crazy.
Because
exactly.
they make us refrigerate. We have to refrigerate butter.
And you know what I did in Vegas, because we have the same thing, is which we should do here actually, is we now have done all whipped butter in ramekins that we smooth, so once it's been whipped and then re-refrigerated, it's softer, so it's much more spreadable almost instantly.
I hate whipped butter.
But it's not whipped American butter.
I hate, but it loses its saltiness.
You have to, right, no, can I tell you something? I'll introduce you a new one. We'll fix this.
Whipped.
Don't worry, we'll discuss this. See, here you go.
With a restaurant, how do you know when it's time to pull the plug? How do you know when this isn't working?
What we've done is we've created all separate
We've had
businesses.
failures.
We've had.
Really?
We've taken the teeth a few times.
Yeah, we take all of
We're
our
not cheap.
businesses. We take all of our businesses and we keep them completely separate.
It's income averaging.
They all have no. They all have to stand on their own. And if one gets to the point where the other restaurants are feeding it to keep it open, we would close that.
One of our perfect examples was when we first did Nona's out in Brookfield, up in Stonewood Village. You know, Joe and I discussed wanting to do like a brick oven pizza concept that would be more family oriented. We hadn't really gone after the family consumer yet. He liked Brookfield because there was lots of families. We found a great building.
It was a great building.
And once we got into it, you know, what was supposed to be a small couple $100,000 budget blossomed into a huge thing. And so we ended up spending a lot more than we thought.
Yeah, you're the businessman.
That happens often,
That happens.
unfortunately.
Well, it does. I mean, sometimes, you know, listen, you don't know until you get it. You know, any doctor will tell you, once you cut open the patient, all bets are off. You know, you never know what you're going to find. So we ended up spending more, you know, not as a criticism in any way, but we did. And then the model that we built was, you know, a $9 pizza, you know, a $4 salad, you know, $5 glasses of wine. The night we closed the restaurant, we did almost 300 customers. The problem is that our check average, the business model, the economic formula was so low that if it didn't have the debt service to kill, it was doing very well, as a matter of fact. It was a successful endeavor.
You lost money at every plate, but you made it up in volume.
No, we were busy. We just couldn't kill our debt. So then Joe said, you know, we could spin our wheels forever here. We need to reconcept this. And then he thought about it. So what could we do that's without spending a lot of money, because we already had a lot of debt. It was only our third restaurant. We couldn't afford a major hit. And he said, let's turn it into a steakhouse. And we did very quickly. And all of a sudden, the customer counts were the same. People were hungry for an Italian steakhouse, and it was an excellent call. The restaurant turned out to be one of our most profitable.
Thank you. We are out of time. I hate to say that. This has been a fast amount of time.
This is it?
This is it? I could talk for a lot longer.
And we'll do a second show.
We need a 3-hour segment.
Joe Bartolotta, Paul Bartolotta, thank you very much. This is just a pleasure. Great to see you. Great to have you on the show. Always great to have you with us. I hope you'll join us next time as we continue to remember.